I'm Caitlin, 28 years old with a mother who acts like I'm an afterthought. The day she canceled my birthday plans to take my stepsister, Heather, shopping was the last straw in our complicated relationship. For years I watched as my mom consistently chose her over me, but this time was different. This time, I made a choice that would change everything for all of us. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join me on this journey. My parents divorced when I was 10 years old. It was a messy separation that left emotional scars I'm still dealing with today. My father moved across the country to Seattle shortly after, and our relationship dwindled to occasional phone calls on holidays and a birthday card with $20 inside if I was lucky. I stayed with my mother in our small suburban home outside of Boston, trying to rebuild our lives as a duo rather than a trio. For 8 years, it was just my mom and me against the world. We developed routines and traditions that kept us close despite the upheaval. Friday night movies with popcorn, Sunday morning pancakes with blueberries, and birthdays. Birthdays were sacred. My mother always took the day off work, planned special outings, and made me feel like the most important person in her world for those 24 hours. Then, when I turned 18 and was preparing to head off to college, my mother met Richard at a company picnic. He was charming, successful, and came with a 12-year-old daughter named Heather from his previous marriage. Their whirlwind romance resulted in a wedding just 6 months later, and suddenly our duo expanded to a quartet. Initially, I was excited about the new additions to our family. Richard seemed kind enough, if a bit distant, and I had always secretly wanted a sibling. I imagined Heather and I forming a bond like sisters in movies, sharing clothes, giving each other advice, having late-night talks. I was naive. The change in my mother was subtle at first: missed calls while I was at college because she was helping Heather with homework, canceled weekend visits because Heather had dance recitals or soccer games. I made excuses. Mom was just trying to make Heather feel welcome. She was building a relationship with her new stepdaughter. Things would balance out eventually. They never did. After graduating with my degree in graphic design, I moved into an apartment about 20 minutes from my mom's house. I landed a job at a marketing firm and thought being physically closer would help rebuild our relationship. Instead, I had a front-row seat to watch my mother transform into someone I barely recognized, someone who organized her entire life around her new husband and stepdaughter. Birthdays became the most painful marker of this change. My 24th birthday was the first real disappointment. Mom had promised dinner at my favorite restaurant, but called last minute to reschedule because Heather needed help with a school project. My 25th was a rushed lunch where my mother checked her phone constantly and left early to pick up Heather from a friend's house. My 26th was a gift card sent by mail because they were on a family vacation. A vacation I hadn't been invited to join. My 27th was a belated dinner 2 weeks after the actual date because Heather had gotten into a minor fender bender and my mother was too stressed to celebrate on time. Through it all, I kept hoping things would change. I kept making excuses. Richard was controlling. Heather was going through typical teenage issues. Mom was trying to keep her new marriage stable. I understood the pressures she faced, but understanding didn't make the pain of being sidelined any less acute. There were countless smaller rejections between birthdays. The weekly Sunday brunches I tried to establish were attended maybe once a month. The concert tickets I purchased months in advance were wasted when Mom canceled at the last minute because Heather needed a dress for a school dance. The Christmas Eve I spent alone because a snowstorm delayed their return from visiting Richard's parents, and no one thought to invite me along in the first place. Your mom is trying her best, my friends would say. Blended families are complicated, but was she trying her best? The question haunted me as I watched her bend over backward to accommodate Heather's every need and whim, while treating my needs as optional, my feelings as inconvenient. The reality I didn't want to face was becoming clearer with each disappointment in my mother's new family structure. I had become peripheral. Still, despite the evidence piling up, I clung to hope. Each time Mom suggested plans, I'd get excited, thinking this might be the time things changed. Each promise she made, I believed, despite her track record. Each birthday I thought would be different from the last. I was setting myself up for heartbreak, but I couldn't help it. She was my mom, and I needed to believe she still loved me the way she once had. 3 weeks before my 28th birthday, my mother called me out of the blue on a Tuesday evening. "Caitlin, sweetie, I've been thinking about your birthday," she said, her voice unusually enthusiastic. "I want to take the whole day off work and spend it with you. We could go to that spa in Cambridge you've mentioned. Have lunch at Antonio's. Maybe do some shopping afterward. What do you think?" My heart leaped. This was the mother I remembered, the one who planned special days and made me feel cherished. "That sounds amazing, Mom," I replied, trying to contain my excitement. "Are you sure you can take the whole day off?" "Absolutely. I've already spoken to my boss. The 23rd is blocked off in my calendar. No work. No interruptions. Just mother-daughter time." We talked for nearly an hour, planning the details of our day together. She suggested specific treatments at the spa, reminisced about previous birthdays from my childhood, and seemed genuinely invested in creating a special experience. For the first time in years, I felt like a priority to her. The next day, I requested the day off work. My boss, Gary, was understanding, and even joked about how I never took personal days, so this was long overdue. I began looking forward to my birthday with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. That weekend, I went shopping for a new outfit to wear. I spent more than I should have on a navy blue dress that made me feel confident and beautiful. I even splurged on new shoes and a matching purse. Standing in front of the mirror in the store's fitting room, I imagined my mother's reaction to seeing me so put together, so grown up. Would she be proud? Would she finally see me as the successful adult I'd become? Despite feeling abandoned by her. Over the next 2 weeks, Mom and I exchanged texts confirming various details. She booked our spa appointments. I made lunch reservations. She asked about my shoe size because she was thinking of buying me new boots as a gift. Each message reinforced my hope that this birthday would be different. During this time, I met my best friend Arturo for coffee. Arturo and I had been friends since college, and he knew the complicated history with my mother better than anyone. "She's planning this whole day for us," I told him, showing him the text messages. "Spa, lunch, shopping. Just like she used to do when I was younger." Arturo studied my face, his expression cautious. "That sounds great, Kate. Just try not to get your hopes too high." "Okay. I don't want to see you hurt again." "This time feels different," I insisted. "She's initiated everything. She's excited about it. She's already taken the day off work." "I hope you're right," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You deserve a great birthday." Despite his warning, I couldn't temper my excitement. I bought a small silver bracelet as a thank you gift for my mother, engraved with our birthstones side by side. I imagined giving it to her over lunch, telling her how much this day meant to me, how I'd been waiting for us to reconnect. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, planning what I would say, how I would finally open up about my feelings of neglect without accusation or anger. The night before my birthday, I called Mom to confirm our final plans. "We're still on for tomorrow, right? The spa appointment is at 10. "Of course, sweetie," she replied, though I noticed she sounded distracted. "I'll pick you up at 9:30. Is everything okay? You sound busy." "Just helping Heather with some homework. Nothing major. See you tomorrow, birthday girl." The call ended, and I pushed away the small knot of anxiety that had formed in my stomach. She had confirmed our plans. She had called me birthday girl. Everything was going to be fine. This birthday would be different. I went to sleep that night, filled with anticipation, dreaming of reconciliation and renewed closeness with the woman who had once been my best friend. I allowed myself to hope foolishly, that tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. I woke up early on my birthday, excitement buzzing through me like electricity. The weather seemed to mirror my mood, bright sunshine streaming through my bedroom curtains, birds chirping outside. It felt like the universe was conspiring to make this day perfect. I took extra care getting ready. I styled my hair in loose waves the way my mother always complimented. I applied makeup carefully. Not too much, but enough to enhance my features. I slipped into my new navy dress and admired my reflection. At 28, I was finally comfortable in my own skin, confident in who I had become. I just wanted my mother to see it too. At 9:15, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen and I answered with a bright, "Good morning." "Caitlin, honey," my mother began her voice, carrying that specific tone I'd learned to dread over the years. "I have some bad news." My stomach dropped instantly. I knew what was coming before she said another word. "Heather just tried on her dress for the winter formal this weekend, and it doesn't fit right. We need to exchange it today because the store has a limited return policy and then find accessories to match. I'm so sorry, but I need to take her shopping instead of our spa day." I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to form words for several seconds. It's my birthday." I finally managed my voice. Small and strained. "I know, sweetie, and I feel terrible," she replied, though her tone lacked genuine remorse. "But this is really important to Heather. You know how these high school dances are. It's a big deal for her, and my birthday isn't a big deal." The words escaped before I could stop them. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course it is. We can reschedule for next weekend. The spa will still be there, right?" She forced a laugh that made my chest ache. "You're an adult, Caitlin. Heather's still at an age where these events are formative experiences." In that moment, it became crystal clear I would always come second to Heather. My needs, my feelings, my special days would always be sacrificed on the altar of my stepsister's convenience. "Mom, we've been planning this for weeks," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I took the day off work. I made reservations. I bought a new dress to wear. I'm sorry, but Heather is really upset about this dress situation. You know how sensitive she is. I can't let her down." "But you can let me down," I thought bitterly. "Again and again and again. Can't Richard take her?" I asked, grasping at straws. "Or can't it wait until tomorrow? Richard's at work, and the return policy expires today." Her voice took on an edge of impatience. "Look, I need to go. Heather's waiting in the car. I'll call you tonight, and we'll figure out a time to reschedule." "Okay. Happy birthday, sweetie." And just like that, she was gone. No real apology. No acknowledgement of the significance of what she'd done. Just empty promises of rescheduling that we both knew would never materialize into anything concrete. I stood in my silent apartment, dressed up with nowhere to go, holding my phone in a death grip. The tears came slowly at first, then in a flood I couldn't control. I sank onto my couch, careful not to wrinkle my new dress, as if that still mattered, and let myself cry until my mascara ran in black rivers down my cheeks. When the crying finally subsided, I sent my mother a text. "I'm really hurt that you canceled our plans today." This was important to me. No response came. An hour later, I sent another. "Can you at least let me know when you might be free to reschedule?" Still nothing. By early afternoon, I had changed out of my dress into sweatpants and an old t-shirt. I ordered takeout from the Chinese restaurant down the street and ate it straight from the container while watching mindless reality television. Some birthday. At 3:30, my phone pinged with a message from my mother. My heart jumped until I opened it to find not an apology or even acknowledgement of my earlier texts, but a photo of Heather trying on a sparkly blue dress with the caption, "Found the perfect one." That's when something inside me broke. Not just cracked, but shattered completely. The evidence was irrefutable. My mother had not only abandoned our plans, but was now rubbing salt in the wound by showing me who was more important. I threw my phone across the room, thankful for the protective case that prevented it from breaking against the wall. Then I curled up on my couch and sobbed again, this time from a place deeper than hurt. This was grief. I was mourning the mother I once had, the relationship I kept hoping would return. At 5 o'clock, my phone rang again. It was Arturo calling to wish me happy birthday. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed to hear a friendly voice. "Happy birthday, Kate," he said cheerfully when I picked up. His enthusiasm faded immediately when he heard my congested breathing. "What's wrong? What happened?" "She canceled," I said simply, my voice hoarse from crying. "For Heather." Again. There was a beat of silence before Arturo spoke again, his voice gentle but tight with controlled anger. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't argue. I'm bringing cupcakes, and we're going to salvage this day. You don't have to. 20 minutes, Caitlin. And wear something comfortable. We're not staying in." True to his word, Arturo arrived at my door 19 minutes later, holding a box of cupcakes from my favorite bakery and a small wrapped gift. The sight of his familiar face, concerned but determined to cheer me up, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "No more crying," he said, firmly wrapping me in a hug. "Today is still your birthday, and we're still going to celebrate it. With or without your mom." As I rested my head against his shoulder, I realized this was the most cared for I'd felt all day. The contrast between Arturo's steadfast friendship and my mother's casual dismissal couldn't have been more stark or more painful. Arturo refused to let me wallow in my apartment. Despite my protests, he convinced me to change into jeans and a sweater, then practically dragged me to his car. He drove us to a small Italian restaurant across town, one my mother didn't know about, and would never accidentally show up at with Heather in tow. "I don't feel like celebrating," I muttered, as we were seated at a corner table. "We're not celebrating," Arturo replied, unfolding his napkin. "We're eating carbs and talking about your feelings. There's a difference." Despite myself, I smiled faintly. This was why Arturo had been my best friend for nearly a decade. He knew exactly what to say and when to say it. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I began unpacking the day's events and the years of similar disappointments that preceded them. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. It was like a dam had broken. "It's not just today," I said, twirling spaghetti around my fork without eating it. "It's every time she's chosen Heather over me. Every canceled plan. Every forgotten promise. Every time I've been made to feel like I'm asking for too much by simply wanting my mother to be present in my life." Arturo listened intently, occasionally asking questions that pushed me to dig deeper into patterns I'd been ignoring. "Remember my college graduation?" I continued, the memories flooding back. "She left early because Heather had a stomachache. Not even a real emergency. A stomachache. She missed me giving my department speech because Heather, who was 14 at the time, couldn't handle some mild discomfort for an hour. And the time you had that art show downtown," Arturo added gently. "You'd been working on those pieces for months. She didn't show up at all. Heather had a friend over, and Mom didn't want to disrupt their sleepover plans by asking Richard to watch them for 2 hours." I took a large sip of wine. Who does that? Who chooses a teenage sleepover over their daughter's first professional art exhibition? "Your mom," Arturo said simply. "Caitlin, how long are you going to keep hoping she'll change?" The question hung between us, uncomfortable but necessary. How long indeed I'd been making excuses for my mother's behavior for years. I'd been accepting scraps of her attention and convincing myself it was a feast. I don't know how to stop hoping, I admitted, my voice cracking. She's my mom. She's supposed to love me. I think she does love you, Arturo said carefully. But not in the way you need. And at some point, you have to decide if waiting for her to become the mother you deserve is worth the continuing heartbreak. As we talked, my sadness gradually transformed into something else. Anger. Not a hot, explosive anger, but a slow-burning realization that I deserved better than what I'd been accepting. I deserved a mother who kept her promises. I deserved to be prioritized sometimes. I deserved to have my birthday acknowledged, with more than a last-minute cancellation and a thoughtless text. We were halfway through our cupcakes when my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. "You don't have to answer," Arturo said. But I did. Some part of me still hoped for an apology, for recognition of how deeply she'd hurt me. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound neutral. "Caitlin, did you have a good day, sweetie?" My mother's voice was bright, as if nothing unusual had happened, as if she hadn't completely shattered our plans, and my heart along with them. "No, Mom, I didn't have a good day," I replied, my newfound anger giving me courage. "I spent the morning crying because you canceled our plans for Heather." Again. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "We'll reschedule. Heather really needed." "I don't care what Heather needed," I interrupted, my voice rising enough that diners at nearby tables glanced our way. Arturo reached across the table and squeezed my hand in support. "It was my birthday. One day. I asked for 1 day of your time, and you couldn't even give me that." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "You know how important these social events are for teenagers. Heather needed me more than you did today." Those words, "Heather needed me more than you did," struck me like a physical blow. "When has that not been true?" I asked quietly. "When in the past 10 years have you ever decided that I needed you more than Heather did?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "You're 28 years old, Caitlin," my mother finally said. "You're an adult with a job and your own life. Heather is still growing up. She still needs guidance. And I don't. I don't need my mother anymore. Because I'm an adult." "Is that how love works in your world, Mom?" "It expires when your child turns 18. I heard muffled voices on her end of the line, then my stepfather's voice came through. "Caitlin, this is Richard. I think you need to stop this right now and grow up. Your mother does a lot for you, and this entitled attitude is inappropriate. Heather overheard you yelling, and now she's upset, thinking this is somehow her fault. Of course, Heather was upset, so everyone had to drop everything to manage her feelings. Including me on my birthday when I was the one who had been wronged. Tell Heather not to worry," I said coldly. "This isn't about her. This is about Mom consistently choosing her new family over her daughter. This is about years of being treated like an inconvenience. This is about breaking the final straw." "Don't be melodramatic," Richard scoffed. "This kind of emotional manipulation isn't going to—" I hung up. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years I felt something close to liberation. I had finally said what I'd been holding back for so long. "I'm proud of you," Arturo said quietly. My phone immediately began ringing again. Richard calling back, no doubt, to continue lecturing me. I turned the phone off completely and slipped it into my purse. "I can't do this anymore," I said to Arturo, the realization crystallizing in my mind. "I can't keep hoping she'll change. I can't keep setting myself up for disappointment. I need to make a change myself." Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat at my computer and began researching. First, articles about emotional neglect and toxic family dynamics, which led me to forums filled with stories so similar to mine that I could have written them myself. Then, job listings in other cities. Then apartment rentals. A plan began to form in my mind, a radical one. Distance. Not just emotional distance, which I'd tried and failed to maintain while living 20 minutes away, but physical distance. A fresh start somewhere. My mother's casual cruelty couldn't reach me on a daily basis. Somewhere I could build a life centered around people who actually showed up for me. As painful as the day had been, it had given me clarity. I couldn't control my mother's actions or priorities, but I could control my own. I could choose to stop waiting for her to love me the way I needed. I could choose to fill my life with people who demonstrated their care consistently. I could choose myself. That night, I applied for 3 jobs in Chicago, including one at a prestigious agency I'd always admired, but had been too afraid to pursue. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in years, I was taking concrete action to change my circumstances rather than just hoping things would improve on their own. Before falling asleep, I wrote a list titled, "What I Need in My Journal." Not what I hoped for or wished for, but what I absolutely required to maintain my emotional health moving forward. Boundaries with my mother topped the list. No more accepting last-minute cancellations. No more pretending her behavior wasn't hurtful. No more making myself small to accommodate her new family. It was time to make a choice that prioritized my happiness. And surprisingly, once I'd made that decision, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Within 2 weeks of my birthday disaster, I received an email that changed everything. An interview request from Grant Design Collective, the Chicago agency I'd applied to on a whim. Their creative director had been impressed by my portfolio and wanted to speak as soon as possible. The interview process moved quickly, a video call followed by a design challenge, then a final interview with the whole team. 7 days after that first email, I was offered the position with a salary 20% higher than what I was making in Boston. They wanted me to start in 3 weeks. I accepted immediately. The moment after ending the call with my soon-to-be boss, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and terror. I was really doing this. I was moving hundreds of miles away from the only city I'd ever lived in, away from my mother and her disappointing love. Away from the constant reminder of my peripheral status in her life. Telling my mother was its own challenge. I invited her to coffee, thinking a public place would help keep emotions in check. She arrived 15 minutes late, distracted and checking her phone periodically for texts from Heather. "I've accepted a job in Chicago," I said after our drinks arrived. "I'm moving at the end of the month." She looked up from her phone, blinking in surprise. "Chicago? Why would you move to Chicago?" "It's a great opportunity. Better pay, more creative control, chance to work with bigger clients. But your whole life is here," she protested, setting her phone down for the first time since arriving. "Your friends? Your apartment? Me? And Richard? And Heather." I almost laughed at that last part. "Mom, I've barely seen you in months. The last significant plan we had was my birthday, and we both know how that turned out." Her face hardened slightly. "Are you still upset about that I told you we could reschedule? Have you tried to reschedule? Have you once, in the 3 weeks since my birthday, suggested a specific day to make it up to me?" Her silence was answer enough. "This isn't just about my birthday," I continued, keeping my voice level. "This is about me needing a fresh start. The job is perfect for me, and I'm excited about it." "Well," she said, after a moment, her tone slightly wounded, "I suppose if your mind is made up, there's nothing I can say. No, I'll miss you. No, how can I support you with this move? Just the implication that I was being somehow unreasonable by pursuing a career opportunity that would take me away from her sporadic attention." "I'm leaving on the 28th, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "I've already given notice at work and started packing." "So soon? What about your lease?" "I'm breaking it. The fee is worth it." We finished our coffee and awkward conversation, my mother asking practical questions about my new job, without ever addressing the emotional undercurrent of my decision. When we parted in the parking lot, her hug was brief and perfunctory. "Let us know if you need any help with the move," she said, already opening her car door. "I will," I replied, knowing I wouldn't. Richard and Heather didn't even bother to say goodbye. My mother told me they both sent their best wishes, but were too busy to see me before I left. It stung, but not as much as it once would have. Their absence merely confirmed I was making the right choice. Arturo, on the other hand, was my rock during those frantic weeks of preparation. He helped me sort through 5 years' worth of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to donate. He connected me with a friend of his in Chicago, who sent information about different neighborhoods and restaurants. He even took time off work to drive with me to my new city since I'd sold my car, and rented a small moving truck instead. The night before our departure, as we finished packing the last of my kitchen items, I came across a box of childhood mementos my mother had given me when she moved in with Richard. Inside were birthday cards from my early teens, the years when my mother still made each celebration special. In one she had written, "To my precious daughter, the light of my life. Being your mother is my greatest joy." I showed it to Arturo, my throat tight. "She used to love me like this." "What happened?" "She still loves you," he said gently. "She just doesn't know how to love you and her new family at the same time. And she's made her choice clear. So now I'm making mine," I whispered, placing the card back in the box. The drive to Chicago took 16 hours, spread over 2 days. Arturo and I took turns at the wheel, singing along to playlists, stopping at quirky roadside attractions, talking about everything and nothing. By the time we pulled up to my new apartment building, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd left more than just physical possessions behind in Boston. My new place was smaller than my old apartment, but filled with character hardwood floors, exposed brick on one wall, large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Arturo stayed for 3 days, helping me unpack and explore my new neighborhood. When he finally had to return to Boston, I felt a pang of sadness, but not the panic I'd expected. I was ready for this new chapter. My job at Grant Design Collective proved to be everything I'd hoped for. My colleagues were talented and welcoming, the work was challenging in the best way, and my ideas were not just heard but valued. Within weeks, I'd settled into a routine that felt both comfortable and exciting. I made new friends through work and through a weekly art class I joined at a local community center. I explored the city on weekends, discovering favorite cafes and bookstores. I started a small container garden on my apartment balcony. Slowly but steadily, I built a life that was fully mine. Throughout those first 3 months, my contact with my mother dwindled to occasional text messages. She rarely initiated conversation, and when she did, it was usually to share news about Heather's achievements or Richard's work projects, never to ask how I was adjusting to my new city. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining a distance that protected my healing heart. Arturo and I spoke weekly via video call. He kept me grounded, reminding me of my worth when old doubts crept in, celebrating my small victories in establishing my new life. "You seem different," he observed during one of our calls about 3 months after my move. "More confident, happier." "I am." I realized as I said it. I'm not waiting anymore for Mom's approval, for her attention, for her to suddenly become the mother I need. I'm just living my life. It was around this time that my mother's messages began to change. Her texts became more frequent, more inquisitive. "How's the weather in Chicago? Have you tried that famous deep dish pizza yet? Send me pictures of your apartment." After months of near silence, her sudden interest was jarring. "She's noticing your absence," Arturo theorized when I mentioned it to him. "You're not available anymore. And she's finally realizing what she's losing." I maintained my boundaries, responding when I had the emotional energy but not rearranging my life to accommodate her newfound curiosity. I didn't share too much, keeping my responses friendly but somewhat superficial. I wasn't ready to let her back into the intimate details of my life, not after years of having those details dismissed as unimportant. Meanwhile, I started seeing a therapist, something I'd considered for years but had never prioritized. Dr. Stevens helped me work through the complex emotions surrounding my relationship with my mother. The love mixed with resentment, the hope tangled with hurt, the desire for connection battling with the need for self-protection. "You're grieving," she told me during one session. "Not just the relationship you wish you had with your mother, but the relationship you once did have with her before her remarriage changed the dynamic." This framework helped me process my feelings without judging them. It was okay to be angry. It was okay to be sad. It was okay to set boundaries that protected me from further hurt. And most importantly, it was okay to build a life that didn't revolve around winning back my mother's attention. 6 months after leaving Boston, I realized with surprise that I was truly happy. Not the fragile, conditional happiness I'd known before, dependent on my mother's approval or attention, but a steady contentment built on self-respect and genuine connections with people who valued me consistently. I had made a choice to prioritize my well-being, and that choice had changed everything. On a Saturday morning in early spring, 6 months after my move to Chicago, a knock at my apartment door startled me from my morning coffee ritual. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people even knew my address in Chicago. When I opened the door, my mother stood in the hallway, looking both determined and uncertain. "Mom," I said, too shocked to say anything else. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," she replied. As if appearing unannounced in a city hundreds of miles from home was perfectly normal. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside silently, my mind racing. She entered my apartment, glancing around with obvious curiosity, taking in the art on my walls, the thriving plants on my balcony, the evidence of a life being well lived, without her in it. "Your place is lovely," she said, setting down her purse. "Very you." "Thanks," I managed, still processing her unexpected presence. "How did you know where I live?" "Arturo gave me your address. I called him yesterday and said I needed to see you in person." She looked down at her hands. "I hope that's okay." Arturo hadn't mentioned this to me. I made a mental note to talk to him later about boundaries. "You could have called first," I said, trying to keep accusation from my voice. "I might have had plans today." "Do you have plans, I mean?" "No, but that's not the point." An awkward silence stretched between us, until I sighed and gestured toward the kitchen. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Over coffee at my small dining table, my mother attempted small talk, commenting on my apartment's view, asking about my job, mentioning the unseasonably warm weather in Boston. I answered her questions politely but briefly, waiting for her to reveal the real purpose of her visit. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes of surface-level conversation, I set down my mug and asked directly, "Mom, why are you really here?" She looked startled then, a bit embarrassed. "I missed you." "Is that so hard to believe?" "Honestly, yes." The words came out before I could soften them. "You've barely reached out in 6 months. Before that, you canceled our plans regularly, including my birthday. So forgive me if I'm skeptical that you suddenly missed me enough to fly to Chicago without warning." My mother's expression shifted from embarrassment to defensiveness. "That's not fair, Caitlin. I've been trying to connect with you, but you've been so distant in your texts." "I've been protecting myself," I replied calmly. "Every time I let myself get excited about spending time with you, something more important comes up. Usually something involving Heather. You make it sound like I've abandoned you. I'm still your mother. Being my mother in name isn't the same as being present in my life, Mom." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. For a moment I regretted my bluntness, but then reminded myself that dancing around the truth hadn't served either of us well in the past. "What would you like me to do?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Tell me how to fix this." The question caught me off guard. In all my imaginings of this conversation, and I'd imagined it countless times, my mother had never asked for specific guidance on how to repair our relationship. She had defended, accused, or dismissed, but never sought instruction. "I need you to acknowledge that you've consistently prioritized Heather over me," I said carefully. "I need you to understand how much that's hurt me over the years, and I need you to commit to actual change, not just empty promises that get broken the moment Heather needs something." To my complete surprise, my mother's eyes filled with tears. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen before when she felt cornered, but genuine, painful emotion. "I know I've hurt you," she whispered. "I've known it for a long time, but I didn't know how to fix it without risking my marriage." "What do you mean?" She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Richard has always been particular about Heather. From the beginning, he made it clear that her needs came first, that if I wanted our marriage to work, I needed to embrace Heather as my own. So you embraced her at my expense." The pain in my voice was unmistakable. "I didn't intend to," she said, wiping at her eyes. "At first I thought I could balance it all, be there for you, and for Heather equally. But Richard would get so upset if I ever put plans with you ahead of something Heather wanted or needed. He'd accuse me of not trying hard enough with his daughter, of still prioritizing my old family over my new one. And you were afraid he'd leave if you stood up to him." I guessed pieces falling into place. She nodded miserably. "After your father left, I was terrified of being alone again, of failing at another marriage. So I gave in. Each time I told myself it was just this once, that I'd make it up to you. But then, the next conflict would arise, and I'd make the same choice again." I sat back in my chair, processing this revelation. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it contextualized it in a way I hadn't considered before. "Your birthday," she continued, her voice thick with emotion, "when I canceled for Heather's dress. That wasn't even a real emergency. The dress fit fine. Richard just decided that morning that it wasn't appropriate enough, and insisted we find something new immediately. I tried to explain I had plans with you, but he made such a scene about how I was sabotaging Heather's social life." "Why didn't you ever tell me this was happening?" I asked. "Pride, I suppose. Shame. I didn't want you to know I'd gotten myself into another dysfunctional relationship." And as time went on, it got harder to admit how much I'd let you down. She reached across the table tentatively, not quite touching my hand. "When you moved away so suddenly, it was like a wake-up call. I realized I might lose you completely if something didn't change." Before I could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at it, and I saw a flash of something like fear cross her face. "It's Richard," she said, her finger hovering over the decline button. "You should answer it," I said. "I'm curious what he'll say when he realizes you're here." She hesitated, then answered on speaker. "Hello, Linda, where are you?" Richard's voice was sharp with annoyance. "You said you were going shopping. Heather needs help with her college applications today." My mother looked at me, something resolute forming in her expression. "I'm in Chicago, Richard, visiting Caitlin." The silence that followed was deafening. "Chicago," he finally said. "You flew to Chicago without telling me. What about Heather's applications?" "Heather is 18 years old," my mother replied, her voice steadier than I'd heard it in years. "She can work on her applications today, and I'll help her when I get back tomorrow." "This is unacceptable, Linda. You can't just—" "I can actually. My daughter needs me too, Richard. I've neglected her for too long, and I'm trying to make amends. I'm coming back to get you." "This is ridiculous." "No, you're not. I'm staying until tomorrow as planned. We can talk when I get home." She ended the call before he could respond. then looked at me with a mixture of fear and triumph. That's the first time I've stood up to him about you in years. The revelation of my mother's marital dynamic didn't erase the hurt of the past decade, but it shifted something in my understanding. My mother hadn't rejected me because she loved me less than Heather. She'd been trapped in a controlling relationship that forced her to prove her loyalty by sidelining me. "Mom," I said gently, "I think you might need to examine your marriage, not just your relationship with me." She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing, especially since you left. Seeing you now, how confident and happy you seem, it's made me realize how much I've compromised myself trying to keep Richard happy." We talked for hours after that, more honestly than we had in years. I shared how her neglect had affected me, the ways I'd tried to make myself smaller and less needy to earn her love. She shared her regrets and fears her gradual loss of autonomy in her marriage, her shame at allowing herself to be manipulated at my expense. When she finally left that evening to check into a nearby hotel, we hugged for a long time. Nothing was magically fixed. Years of hurt couldn't be erased in a single conversation, but a door had been opened. For the first time in a decade, I felt hope that wasn't based on denial or wishful thinking, but on honest communication and a shared desire for healing. As I closed my apartment door behind her, I wasn't sure what would happen when she returned to Boston and faced Richard's anger. I wasn't sure if she would maintain her newfound courage or revert to old patterns, but I was sure of one thing: regardless of what choices my mother made going forward, I would continue prioritizing my own well-being. I had built a life I loved, and while I hoped my mother could be part of it in a healthier way, my happiness no longer depended on her ability to show up for me. I called Arturo that night, recounting the unexpected visit and revelations. "Do you think she'll really change?" he asked when I'd finished. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But for the first time, I think she actually wants to. And even if she doesn't, I'll be okay." Those words, "I'll be okay," felt like the most important truth I'd discovered in this whole journey. With or without my mother's consistent love, I would be okay. I already was. 1 month after my mother's surprise visit, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. Her name flashed on the screen, and I answered with cautious optimism. "Hi, Mom," I said, settling onto my couch. "How are you?" "I'm doing better," I think she replied. There was a new quality to her voice, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "I've started seeing a therapist." This was unexpected. My mother had always dismissed therapy as something for people with real problems, not for normal family issues like ours. "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "What prompted that?" After I got back from Chicago, Richard and I had a huge fight. He couldn't understand why I'd prioritize visiting you over helping Heather with her applications. It made me see how controlling he's become, how I've allowed myself to be manipulated. She paused. "The therapist is helping me understand why I've made the choices I have and how to set better boundaries going forward." "How's that going?" "The boundary setting. It's hard," she admitted. "Richard doesn't like it when I say no to him or Heather. But I'm learning that his disapproval won't actually kill me." She laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. "And surprisingly, Heather has been more understanding than her father." "Really?" This was even more unexpected than the therapy revelation. She asked for my phone number after I got back from Chicago. Said she wanted to text you directly instead of always going through me. I had indeed received a tentative text from Heather a couple of weeks ago, an awkward but seemingly sincere message saying she was sorry if she'd ever caused problems between my mother and me. I'd responded politely, but cautiously unsure of her motives. "She's growing up," my mother continued. "Starting to see her father more clearly, I think, and maybe starting to understand that his way of pitting us against each other wasn't healthy for anyone." We talked for nearly an hour, my mother sharing the small but significant changes she was making in her relationships with Richard and Heather, me updating her on my life in Chicago. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, without the undercurrent of resentment and unspoken hurt that had characterized our interactions for so long. Over the next several weeks, our communication continued to improve. We established a regular Sunday evening call that she never canceled. She sent occasional care packages with my favorite teas and books she thought I might enjoy. She asked thoughtful questions about my work and friends, and actually remembered the details I shared for future conversations. I remained cautiously optimistic, protective of my newfound emotional equilibrium. Dr. Stevens, my therapist, helped me navigate this evolving relationship without falling back into unhealthy patterns of expectation and disappointment. Your mother is showing promising signs of change, she observed during one session. But your healing doesn't depend on her transformation. Remember that. I did remember focusing on continuing to build my fulfilling life in Chicago, regardless of how my relationship with my mother progressed. My career was thriving. I'd recently been promoted to senior designer and given my own small team to lead. My social circle had expanded to include close friends who shared my interests in art, hiking, and trying new restaurants. And my friendship with Arturo had evolved in an unexpected but welcome direction, with both of us cautiously acknowledging the deeper feelings that had developed between us. As my 29th birthday approached, I deliberately made no plans with my mother. Last year's disappointment had taught me to protect myself from expectations. I scheduled a dinner with friends from work and made reservations at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try. If my mother remembered my birthday, great. If not, I would still have a wonderful celebration with people who consistently showed up for me. 3 days before my birthday, I received a text from my mother. "Are you free this weekend? I'd like to come visit for your birthday if that's okay." I hesitated before responding. The old pattern would have been to immediately rearrange my plans to accommodate her, grateful for any attention she was willing to give. The new pattern required honesty and boundaries. "I already have dinner plans with friends on Saturday night." I texted back, "But I'd love to see you. If you want to come, we could do lunch on Saturday and brunch on Sunday." Her response was immediate. "That sounds perfect. I'll book my flight today. And I completely understand about your dinner plans. Don't change them on my account." This simple exchange, her asking rather than assuming me, stating my boundaries, her respecting them, felt like a small miracle. When my birthday arrived, I woke to find several text messages from friends, including a particularly sweet one from Arturo, who was planning to visit the following weekend. But what surprised me most was a knock on my door at 9 in the morning. I opened it to find my mother standing there alone, holding a small gift bag and wearing a nervous smile. "Happy birthday, Caitlin," she said. "I hope it's not too early." "You're here," I said, unable to hide my surprise. "I thought we were meeting for lunch." "We are," she assured me quickly. "I just wanted to bring you coffee and a birthday muffin to start your day. I can leave them and go if you'd prefer some space this morning." The consideration in this gesture, bringing something but not assuming I would want company, offering to leave if I needed space, was so different from her past behavior that it momentarily stunned me. "No, please come in," I said, stepping aside. "I was just having my first cup of coffee." Over breakfast, my mother gave me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like 2 overlapping circles. The jeweler said it represents connection that endures, even when paths diverge, she explained. I thought it was appropriate for us. The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to my eyes, not because of its monetary value, but because it showed she had been listening when I talked about preferring silver to gold, understanding our complex relationship, and thinking about what would be meaningful rather than generic. We spent the day together, walking through my neighborhood, visiting my favorite bookstore, and enjoying a leisurely lunch. My mother didn't check her phone once, a small detail that spoke volumes about her commitment to being present with me. When it was time for me to meet my friends for dinner, she hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you for sharing part of your day with me." I know I haven't earned back your trust yet, but I'm going to keep trying. I know you are, I replied, hugging her back. And I see the effort. It matters. That night, surrounded by new friends who knew nothing of my complicated history with my mother, I realized something profound. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined me. I had created a life rich with meaningful connections, fulfilling work, and genuine joy. My mother's love, consistent or not, was no longer the determining factor in my happiness. The next morning over brunch, my mother shared more about her evolving relationship with Richard and Heather. "I've told Richard I want couples counseling," she said, stirring her tea. "He refused at first, but I made it clear it's non-negotiable if we're going to stay married." "That's a big step," I observed. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," she admitted, but also relieved. "I've spent so many years walking on eggshells trying to keep everyone happy except myself. It's exhausting, and I don't want to do it anymore." She looked at me directly. "Seeing you build this life for yourself on your own terms, it's inspired me, Caitlin. You're braver than I've been." "I learned it from somewhere," I said gently. "Before everything changed, you were the one who taught me to stand up for myself." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I forgot that lesson myself for a while. I'm trying to remember now." When we parted at the airport that afternoon, our goodbye felt different from any we'd shared in the past decade. There was a mutual respect that had been missing before, an acknowledgement of both the hurt we'd caused each other and the healing we were trying to create. "I love you, Caitlin," she said, hugging me one last time before security. "Not just because you're my daughter, but because of the incredible woman you've become largely without my help." "I love you too, Mom," I replied, meaning it fully for the first time in years. And we're both still becoming. In the months that followed, our relationship continued to strengthen through consistent effort on both sides. My mother maintained her therapy and eventually persuaded Richard to try couples counseling. Their marriage remained a work in progress with uncertain outcomes, but she was no longer sacrificing her relationship with me on the altar of keeping Richard happy. Heather graduated high school and chose a college in California, creating physical distance that seemed to help her develop independence from her father's influence. She and I established a cautious but friendly relationship through occasional texts and social media interactions. Not the sisterly bond I'd once hoped for, but a respectful connection that acknowledged our complicated shared history. Arturo's visits to Chicago became more frequent, eventually leading to discussions about him potentially relocating. The friendship that had sustained me through my darkest times was evolving into something deeper, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding that made me feel truly seen and valued. And through it all, I continued to nurture the most important relationship I'd discovered in this journey, the one with myself. I learned to trust my instincts, honor my needs, and recognize my worth independent of external validation. The painful birthday cancellation that had once felt like the end of the world had ultimately been the catalyst for the most significant growth of my adult life. The truth is, sometimes people don't realize what they have until they lose it. My mother had to lose my constant presence, my unwavering hope, my endless forgiveness before she could understand their value. And I had to lose my expectation of her perfect love before I could build a life that didn't depend on it. In the end, the choice I made wasn't about punishing my mother or teaching her a lesson. It was about valuing myself enough to create boundaries that protected my heart. It was about refusing to accept scraps of attention when I deserved a feast of love. It was about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to walk away until everyone involved is ready to build something healthier. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. but by how you choose to treat yourself.